As you probably already know, neurons are nerve cells that transfer information. They're specialized for this intercellular communication. You need to be able to draw a neuron and all the parts of that neuron. So here's the main parts. The dendrites are branches off the cell body. They receive information from other neurons. The cell body contains organelles, like any other cell body, and part of this cell body is the perikaryon. The cytoplasm around the cell body produces the neurotransmitters that will travel to the end of the axon, down here to the axon terminal, to be released. And the axon carries information from the cell body away. So information is a one-way street. It comes in through the dendrites or cell body and goes out along the axon. The cytoskeleton of the neuron contains quite a few things. Neurofilaments are similar to intermediate filaments, and when these neurofilaments are bundled, they're called neurofibrils, and these neurofibrils will extend along the length of the axon to provide support for that long axon. Keep in mind that an axon can be several feet long. Nerves going out from your spinal cord, say, to your toe, the cell body would be in the spinal cord, and the axon would travel all the way down your leg to your toe. That single axon. So it's a very, very long process. Other components of that axon, the axon hillock. Here's our axon hillock right here, where the cell body meets the axon. Just past the axon hillock is the initial segment where the action potential is initiated. The plasma membrane's given a new name, the axolemma. The cytoplasm's given a new name, the axoplasm. And it contains important neurotubules, which will transfer information from the cell body all the way down to the axon terminal. Not information, but neurotransmitters. The telodendria are at the end of the axon. These fine extensions down here are the telodendria, and they're going to end in either an axon terminal, it's called an axon terminal, or a synaptic knob. Most organelles are in the cell body, and this is where the materials are produced that have to travel along the axon. This process of travel is called exoplasmic transport, and it does occur in both directions. If the axon terminal has parts or chemicals that need to be transported up to the cell body, it can be transported, and this is called retrograde flow. A synapse is a really important spot. It is where one neuron comes into contact with another cell. Now, that other cell could be a neuron, it could be a gland, it could be a muscle cell. But the synapse is where these two communicate. They do not physically touch. There's a gap there. So we have names for these different cells. This neuron that's coming in to the synapse is called the presynaptic neuron, and it is synapsing with the postsynaptic neuron. A neurotransmitter represented by these vesicles, these green vesicles, are filled with neurotransmitters. These neurotransmitters will be released, and the information is going to cross the synaptic cleft. That neurotransmitter is the information of the action potential or signal coming down the axon. So the presynaptic neuron releases the neurotransmitters that will then bind to receptors on the postsynaptic membrane. This axon can produce branches called collaterals, and that allows a single neuron to communicate with more than one cell. So here we see synapses with other cells. So the presynaptic neuron is this blue cell. In all cases, the presynaptic neuron is blue. And the postsynaptic cell here, this purple one, is another neuron. So it will synapse on the dendrites, or the cell body. Here in the second picture, the presynaptic neuron synapses with a muscle fiber. The postsynaptic cell is a muscle cell. And in the third picture, it is synapsing with glands. So the presynaptic cell is a neuron. The postsynaptic cell is a gland. The presynaptic cell will always be a neuron. Now, these neurons lack centrioles, so they can't divide. And this is why when we have spinal cord injuries, everything inferior to the injury is damaged, and there's no sensation. There's some areas where there is replacement of the neurons, but it's very rare in the central nervous system. In the olfactory epithelium, which is located in the nasal cavity, in the retina of the eye, and in a part of the brain called the hippocampus that is responsible for memory. So you need to be able to name and draw out the structural components of the typical neuron. You want to include axon hillock, initial segment, dendrites, axon terminal, cell body, axon, etc. Describe a synapse, and that is the region where a presynaptic cell comes into near contact with a postsynaptic cell. There will always be a gap there. It is neurotransmitters that cross that gap. Compare a presynaptic cell to a postsynaptic cell. Well, the presynaptic cell will always be a neuron, and the postsynaptic cell can be a muscle cell, a neuron, or a gland. And why is a CNS neuron not usually replaced? Because it has no centrioles.